Good day, everybody. Welcome to preparing a T3 return. We're going to walk through the basics of how to and hopefully hit some key points here for you to help you prepare T3 returns efficiently inside of TaxCycle. My name is Sarka Hojda. I'm a CPA CGA with TaxCycle and a tax analyst here. So today we're going to cover creating a T3 return from a T1 return and how to do that efficiently. We're going to be entering beneficiary information where you go to do that, how you allocate income to beneficiaries, using the Schedule 9 worksheet to decide which amounts to tax in the trust and which amounts will be going to a T3 to be taxed in the hands of the beneficiary, preparing those T3 slips, preparing NR4 slips, filing your T3 and slips, and adjusting a T3 return after it's been filed. So we're going to try to get through all of that today. So here I have get to the right one. Here I have a T1 return that I have opened for Donald 76, and he passed away. So we're going to be creating a T3 return for Donald. This is already filed. I'm going to go, and it was his final return. We're going to go to Data, and we're going to create the 2018 T3 return. So nice and simple, it brings over our key data. It brings over when the tax year end based on date of death is. It brings in Donald's information, estate of, social insurance number, date of death, and we're going to fill in that this is Mary 76 is going to be the trustee, and we don't have a trust account number because this is a brand new trust. So we can request an account number by clicking this, fill out the form T3 app. There's a quick link to it here. And then this has to be mailed in or along with the 1013, or you can file it through my account through CRA, the trustee can. All right, and along with that form would be you'd need to mail in the last will and testament or trust documents as well. But all of that is in the form instructions. So one thing to mention too is that an email address is required. So we're going to put that in. So there we go, basic information. And as with all of our TaxCycle products, most of the information that you need to drive your engagement is here on the info form. So you want to make sure that you take care to fill this out completely so that you have all of the relevant forms showing for you in your forms navigation menu. So, and I'm also going to say that foreign property applies because we're going to talk about this a little bit as well. All right, and then down here is the question. It's not an amended return. It is our first year of filing, and we are going to attach all of our documentation to the T3 application for trust number. So I'm gonna put that down here, and you can use the signing date. I like to use the always use today because it's nice and convenient. So once we have our info filled out, we'll move on to the engagement. And here, if you like, you can track engagement information, things that will appear, disclaimers that will appear on your forms when you print them. And then as we go down here, this is where we can authorize or cancel a representative. So we can select the consent type that we want to use. So let's say we're going to have online access by a business. Now with trusts, you don't actually get online access, but it will give you access to all the years by phone if we select this option. And this form cannot be electronically submitted. This has to be mailed, and it cannot be mailed with the T3 return. It has to be mailed separately. Okay, so, and then a lot of this information can also be set in your options to default to what your preferences are for this T1013 and other optimizations throughout the software. So once we have, oh, and one other thing I just wanted to quickly show you was that at the very bottom of this form, there is also a nice little way to put in if there's an address change. So say Mary moves in the next year or so, we can put in the new address here, and it will, when you roll this file forward next year, it will automatically update next year's mailing information. So it's a nice handy thing so that you don't have to keep a reminder separately somewhere else. Okay, so next thing that we need to do is we need to set up our beneficiaries. So we're going to go to our beneficiary form. And this is where we're going to put in all of the people who are beneficiaries of this particular trust. So let's say we have the son. Let's say it's Dan. And we're gonna go in. I'm not gonna fill all of this out because you get the idea. But one thing to know too is that TaxCycle knows if you are not a resident of Canada, it will automatically create an NR4 for you. Or also the Quebec forms are available in here. So if you have a province or territory as Quebec, it will know that it needs to create a Releve 16, I believe it is, for the T3. So that will all be done in the background. But there is also, I'll just backtrack a little bit to the info form. There is a question here under residency. We have Ontario, but if you're in Quebec and you need to file releves for everyone, you would just select yes here, and it will automatically show all the relevant releves for Quebec as well. So let's go back to our beneficiary. So we have Dan, and we're just going to put in a couple more here. Right, we're going to say they're all type 1 individuals, but your whole list of options available for types of beneficiaries are here. So it's a nice simple way to quickly add all of your beneficiaries into your file. And once you have everybody here, you would go to your allocation worksheet. And this is where you're going to select how income is getting allocated, or if it's getting allocated at all, to your beneficiaries. So we can allocate capital gains separately from other income. So we can either leave it as the defaults, which is to allocate equally among all the beneficiaries, and then we can select to use this same method for capital gains income as well. Or if we pull this down, we have the option to allocate based on percentage, dollar, or fraction. If we choose this option, we're going to need to fill in these two columns, one or both columns, however it applies. If you're using the same method, then you only need the income column. You can allocate first to specific beneficiaries and then divide the remainder amongst the remaining beneficiaries. Or so there's a couple ways to do that. And then we have manual allocation, which means that we're not going to fill any of this out. We're going to just simply go straight to our T-slips, and we're going to allocate manually to each individual beneficiary at that point. I'm going to leave this as allocate among all, and we're going to use the same method here. And then the other thing to remember on this page too is that there's a carry forward option. So if we're going to use this option year after year after year, we don't want to have to keep coming in here and specifying. We're going to select this box. It's going to just automatically carry forward all of those selections that you've made to each subsequent year. So quick and easy. Once we have our beneficiaries set up and our allocations are in place, then we can start filling out some of our income information for the trust. Okay, so well, this might be a good time for me to also mention that if you're not already aware, The 2018 federal budget announced that they are going to be changing the filing obligations for certain T3 trusts, which we anticipate is going to substantially increase the number of trusts that are going to be required to file, which previously did not have a requirement to file, and that is going to come into place in the 2021 tax year. So if you're not aware, you might want to have a look into that and see if any of your clients are going to be caught in that particular proposed change. So we will carry on from here. So once we have our beneficiaries, we have our allocation in place, now we're going to put in the income information for the trust. So this trust, let's say we have some T5 income. We'll go in here, we're going to create a T5 slip. So those of you who already use any of our other packages, so if you use T1, for example, you already be familiar with how this works. It's exactly the same. We're going to put in our invest co, the name of our issuer. If there's any allocation to a third party, we will do that here. If it's a foreign slip, you can select foreign currency, and there's a number of pre-populated currencies and currency exchange rates in here for you to make it simple, or you can put in your own. And in this case, let's say we have 125,000 of ordinary dividends or other than eligible, and let's say we have 50,000, nice round numbers of eligible dividends, and maybe we have $1,000 of interest income, and this is earned at banks. So now we have some income, any of these that apply. If there's also other types of income in here, for example, that maybe this trust is running a business, you can fill, or has rental properties, you can fill out the appropriate income statement down here, along with all of the appropriate expenses. For simplicity, we're going to assume that this trust does not have any of that information, but those are all there for you to fill out. And then we have in our worksheet section, I'm going to open that up. There is optimizations, which I think we should look at next. So if you select optimizations, also, I'll just quickly highlight that if you go to the Home tab, we also have Fast Find. So if you know what you're looking for, you can type it in here, and it will quickly narrow the list and help you find what you're looking for. You can also select it from there. So optimizations, in this case, I have my default set up in options to have no optimizations, but I can select any one of these other ones. So I can maximize carry forward, I can reduce tax payable to 0, federal and provincial, or federal or provincial. I have lots of options here. And again, these you can override at any time. It's a nice worksheet to come back to so you can see what TaxCycle is calculating for you for these various things and optimizations. And you can also set this globally in your options. If you go to, I have options, but you can also go File and Options this way. And you would go down to your T3 section, and we would set up our options in here. So those will be available. And then once you've set them, you can carry them forward year to year as well. So that's a handy worksheet to remember. Also, income and deductions. So if you have any other types of income that doesn't fall into a T-slip or an income statement, there's a worksheet here for other income and deductions, and it tells you which line it falls to in your T3 return. So you would just go ahead and populate here whatever other information is pertinent to your particular trust that you're filing for. Once you've got that, then you probably want to go down and review your federal jackets and schedules. TaxCycle will populate based on all of the other information that you have selected, key information in here, but it's always a good idea to just go through and double check and make sure nothing's missing, and making sure that, so here it is already populating the dividends, the T-slip information that I have put in. If you have any dispositions that would create a capital gain, we'd want to put that on the S1 manager and worksheet. So this is where you would go to add, if you had a qualified small business that sold their shares, farm property, again, similar to what you would be familiar with in the T1 module. So, and then that will also populate your S1 schedule. I'm gonna assume that we do not have any of this in here. And then I also just wanted to mention on S8, this is where you would put any of your investment related carrying charges at the bottom. So we would populate that in here. I have an audit message that tells me I have investment reported in this particular file. Do I want to add my carrying charges? So that's a nice reminder for me to make sure that I'm not missing any deductions that I would qualify for in this trust. And then if there's some non-resident components, that's here under other forms. This is where we have some elections. So deemed dispositions and election to defer payment of income. If I had a non-resident, our non-resident forms would also populate there. So again, TaxCycle is quite responsive, so it knows which forms you're going to need to start looking at when you select certain options as you go forward through your file. Once we have all of our income information, I'm just going to put in that I had $2,500 of carrying charges, so we can clear that. We're going to go to our allocation worksheet, S9 WS allocation worksheet. And again, we have a method of allocating income here at the trust level. So if our trust documents say that all the income has to be taxed in the trust, we would select we're allocating 0 income to our beneficiaries. In this case, I'm going to say that we want to allocate all of our income to the beneficiaries. You can also choose to allocate only capital gains or income except capital gains, or you can also allocate manually. So I'm going to go ahead and select all. And then we're going to select automatically for the expense application method as well. And then we also have another handy carry forward allocation methods here, which will carry forward my selections to the next year's file as well. So you can see that TaxCycle has now allocated all of my income to beneficiaries on this form. And so we can now go and look at our slips. Another thing I'll show you here too is that we have a way to filter all of our forms, so we can make our side menu a little bit more manageable. If you select used data or entered or carried forward, it's going to narrow down my form list, so I don't have to look through such a big long list of forms. So that's nice and handy. I'm going to open up my beneficiary slips, and there's all of the beneficiaries that I've added. So let's go to Dan. So now we're just going to make sure that all of our information is accurate here. We're going to say he's not a resident of Quebec. So our allocation's already been set on our allocation worksheet. We have a quick link back to it here if we need to go back and look. Everyone's getting all of our beneficiaries are getting allocated. But if I wanted to, for whatever reason, say that this particular beneficiary, Dan, doesn't qualify, or there's no explicit income being allocated to him this year, we can exclude this slip from filing. So we could select this box, but we can only do it, right, if there is no income actually allocated on the slip. So it's throwing an audit message for me right now because there is income allocated to this beneficiary. But if for whatever reason you need to exclude a beneficiary, this is where you would do it. And then again, we have our carry forward. So if we know that Ben's going to be a beneficiary next year, we can make sure that this is carried forward to the next year by selecting. It's auto selected for you. If you don't want to carry them forward, then you would unselect. So everything's already populated. Everything that's in a blue link is calculated for you. And then if you did have Quebec apply, and maybe we'll just go back to the top here so I can show you that. So let's say that Dan is a resident of Quebec, then your relevé is going to be here at the bottom of this form. So you would just go down here and double check that on the relevé is still correct. Everything is calculated. We have a few boxes that are not that you would need to populate in here for your beneficiary. And then at the very bottom, you can see a sample of how your slip is going to print, what information is going into which boxes. And same with the relevé. So that is all here for you for quick reference. And then we also have your slip summary, which you can reference here so you can see what we're reporting for our total slips. And then I'll just quickly show you too, as you're going through your file, we have some great summaries that are available in our summaries section. So if you had been doing this file for multiple years, you can look at your history. We have a nice 5-year summary here where you can have a quick review of everything that's gone on in your file for the last 5 years. If you're doing year to year and you want to make sure that your trust income looks reasonable for this year compared to what was going on last year, or you want to flag some lines that maybe we didn't have dividends last year and we do this year and we want to ask the client what's changed. This is a great way to do that. You can set up your follow-up variances, a percentage threshold, and some options here where you can narrow down the form. You can choose to follow up and you can make notes here. So a nice handy form to have in your file as well. Okay, so now once we have everything populated in here, we probably want to go to our review tab. We want to clear any of these audit messages that have come up for us. TaxCycle will highlight those. Anything that has a red circle with a dash through it is a required field. So those have to be cleared or the e-filing will not be available for you. So we would go through and just make sure that all of these are dealt with in one way or another. The ones that are this little caution sign here or are generally just helpful hints that we've put in, you can sign those off if you feel that you've already dealt with that, so then we can make that go away. So I'm going to just close this file now. I'm not going to save it. This was our T1. I'm going to go to a finished T3 return where we've already transmitted our slips and we've already transmitted our T3 e-file. So just so you know, I'm going to just quickly show you how this works. I'm going to dismiss this. Oh, and I have errors in here. So I have some unreviewed cautions because I made some changes. I'm just going to quickly get rid of these so we can have our, there we go. So when we're ready to transmit, we go to our transmission window. We're gonna, and we can, if it's a simple file and there's no tax owing, there's no refund balance coming back, and there's no income taxable, basically there's no income taxable. All of the restrictions are listed on this T3 return e-file worksheet. So in this case, I have a simple return, so it qualifies for e-file. I can transmit that electronically. Otherwise, if any of these say yes, then it's going to tell me over here that I have to paper file, that it's not eligible for e-file. T-slips we can transmit. If I click on this, it's going to tell me if I have any slips to transmit, which I do not currently have because I've already transmitted them in this file. But it would tell me, it will show you if you have original slips, amended slips, or canceled slips to transmit. So you've sent your trust return in, you've filed your slips, and now your client comes back to you and they tell you that they've made some changes. So actually, sorry, before I get to that, I'm just gonna quickly mention to you as well that there is another feature here in TaxCycle. If your slips have been successfully filed, on the Data tab, you can also publish your T3 slips to SlipSync. What this does, and there's a full write-up on it on our website for you how this works, but basically it creates a XML file of your T-slip, and then you can, when you go in to create a T1 return for this particular slip recipient, it will match up the social insurance number and name of that person. And so when you open up that T1, it will say, oh, you have a T3 slip, do you want to import it? Which is a really handy feature to have. So if you have a chance, maybe visit the website and you can look at exactly how that works in our handy how-to guide. Okay, so back to our T3 return. So we filed it. Everything seems hunky-dory. Our client comes back to us and they say, oh, I forgot to tell you that I have this other slip that we need to include in the income. So what do? We're going to come back in here into our filed T3 return. And before we do anything else, we're going to want to do, because I don't want to touch the original file, I don't want to make any changes in this. I want to have a clean record of what we did originally. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to Save As. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to Save As, and I'm going to call it Adjusted. And I already had one there, but I'm going to go ahead and replace it. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to open that adjusted file. Oh, see there, I'm already in the adjusted file. So now what I want to do is I want to create a snapshot of my file, which I believe we do, here we go, on the Tools menu. So on the Tools menu, we're going to take a snapshot. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a picture of everything that we had as filed. And you can put whatever description in here makes sense for you. I'm going to say this is my as filed T3 file. And I want to show variances for this snapshot. So I'm going to create a snapshot. So now when I go back into Prepare and I add that other slip, say we're going to add another T5 slip. And let's say they forgot to tell us about some amount of interest that came in from a bank. So you can see here that now my T3 return has changed. So if I click on that, it's going to highlight for me which fields have changed. So there we go. Other investment income has changed. If I hover over that, it tells me what my as filed amount was. So that's what we told CRA that we had, but now we have to amend that to a new number. So how do we do that? CRA does not want you to refile the T3 return. What they want you to do is complete a, and I go to Home, Fast Find, you need to do a T3 adjustment. So we're going to find our T3 adjustment form. And then it doesn't know this is an active form yet, but I'm going to say that our letter, and you have to be an authorized representative in order to file this. I'm going to say this was submitted previously, so it's going to pull in all of our trust details here. And then unlike some of our other modules, this does not automatically populate your lines for you. This is a manual process, so you're going to have to come in here and tell it which lines have changed and then fill out the amounts line by line. So an easy way to do that is TaxCycle has a handy way that hopefully everyone can see this. I know it's going to get kind of tiny, but if I have two monitors, you can put one side here and I can drag this over to here. So I have a nice easy reference side by side, and I can go through all of my fields. So I know I need to add line 5. I go back over here, I can add my line 5. It knows what line that is. So now I hover over here, 27,511 was my previous amount. And then my revised amount is 30. And then you would just carry on, fill that out, have the date, make sure that it's signed by the authorized person or trustee, and then this would get sent in. This has to be mailed in as well. Or if you are already authorized for represent a client, then it says here that you can also submit this electronically through represent a client. So that is how you would amend a return if somebody came back in. Now, what about the slips? So we have extra income. That income is automatically allocated out to all of our beneficiaries because that is the allocation form that we have selected. So all of these are now going to get updated as well. We want to change our type of slip to an amended slip. We want to make sure that that additional information is flowing properly through to our individual fields. And I'm going to have to go through and we're going to send an amended slip to everybody because everybody got changed. So this is how we're going to refile our slips. So I'm just going to go back to full screen mode so you can see this better. So now everybody's amended. If I go to transmit, I'm going to now have to transmit my amended slips. And this is how I'm going to do that. If you're familiar with the T1, then you're already familiar with how this is going to work. If I hit transmit now, it's going to take me to my login credentials, and then it will walk me through how to submit this file electronically. Similar to amended slips, you can also cancel slips using this the same process. So that is what you would do in order to amend or cancel slips after the fact. There's also, I should also mention here on the info form, if you're filing an amended return, there is a selection here under filing for amended return, and you can add your explanatory notes for amended slips or NR4 amended slips down here on your info page, and then this will get transmitted along with your slips. So that is the end of our presentation. So hopefully you guys all learned something from today and found this useful. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us again for another webinar in the future. Everyone have a great day.